Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Give you a couple more seconds to tune in. Looks like we're getting some more attendees. Awesome. I see a lot of our students and instructors on this list. So it's great to have you all here today. Thanks for joining for our session of ATP Ride Report webinar series. My name is Ashley Pilon. I oversee airline and corporate partnerships and alumni services with ATP. And today I'm really excited. We are going to be joined once again by Kit Darby, president of Kit Darby Aviation Consulting. And we're going to be speaking to you guys on developing an effective job search plan this week. So we always go over the ground rules to start. Your microphones will be muted for the duration of this session. Utilize the chat box in the lower right to communicate with us. And if you have any questions for Kit for when we get to the viewer Q&A a little later in this session, in the bottom center of your toolbar, there is a Q&A button. Feel free to place those there and we'll get to them later. And finally, for this week for our poll, since we are discussing a job search plan, we're just interested in finding out, we're going to launch polling on how many hours total time you presently have. So this will pop up in a second. Go ahead and vote with your current level of experience. So it looks like we have a lot of you that are just starting out, some between 250 to 500, 500 to 1,000, 2,000 plus. Okay, we'll give you about 10 more seconds to complete that. And with that being said, I'd just like to once again welcome Kit. Thank you so much. We're really grateful you're here today to impart all of your industry knowledge and experience.
My pleasure, Ashley.
Well, for those of our guests that may not have been able to attend you the last time you spoke on our webinar, can you please just give us a quick synopsis of your background in the aviation industry?
Certainly. Well, I'm an experienced pilot, retired United 767 captain, 24,000 hours, 7,000 hours teaching in simulators for Boeing and Delta now. Now I'm an ATP, CTP instructor at Delta. So in the 30 years I've been a professional pilot, though, I've also run a career information service. It was the old FAPA, and then finally Air Inc., Aviation Information Resources, and finally today, just my name, kitdarby.com, and no, I don't drive a pink Cadillac. But in the process, I've had 200,000 members. We published newsletters, magazines, starter kits, ran job fairs all over the country, 4 to 6 job fairs a year for 20 years. We've had a lot of interaction with the airlines. As these pilots went through the throes of getting their dream job, they tried a lot of different things. And some of those things worked and some of those things didn't work. So having learned from that vast experience of all 200,000 pilots seeking a job, we're here today to sort of straighten the course if we can, to get you from where you are to where you want to be as quick as possible. And part of that is how to run an effective job search plan as you go along.
Perfect. Well, again, yes, today we are discussing that developing an effective job search, and there really are, many means of locating pilot jobs, from aviation-specific job boards to attending airline recruitment events to attending industry job fairs, and we'll dive into that a little bit more shortly. But before we do, what are some areas that you feel a pilot should consider when determining really which jobs to apply for outside of just the bare minimum of meeting the qualifications for an opportunity?
Well, in a normal environment, we would start out with corporate fit. There's in the past, just 4 months ago, there were a bazillion choices, and you could pick the one that fit your style, your location, all the things. A lot of lifestyle choices could be added to that. We're approaching a more difficult job market right now, and it's going to be difficult for a while. So we'd have to start out by saying, any job is a good job in a down market. So you might not be too picky at this point. Corporate fit might not be ideal. In the long term, it'll be important, but short term, it's important to get and keep a flying job to build your qualifications and experience during the downturn. Now, once you're looking at a job, if you had a choice or if you're evaluating the value of the choice you have, you want to get good flight time. And so what is good flight time? The airlines, they fly scheduled passenger operations in multi-engine turbine airplanes in and out of high-density airports. That's what they do. They fly instruments everywhere they go. They fly day or night. They pretty much, that's the kind of flying that they value because that's what they do. So anything you can do that comes closer to what they do. So twin engine over multi, turbine over recip, jet over turbine, captain over co-pilot. You're trying to evaluate those things. What are the opportunities either to get the job initially, or what does it hold for you in the future? Can you move up to bigger, better equipment, or can you get a higher position and use that experience later to get the job you want?
And in addition to the experience, I know that you had mentioned, or we've talked about also having additional qualifications. So as far as present day, previously the regionals would provide the CTP and provide the ATP. How do you think that really having those completed in advance helps broaden your potential opportunities?
Well, certainly from the private instrument, commercial, CFI, aircraft instrument, and multi-engine, that's sort of a basic qualification suite. It allows you to be an instructor, which is one of the typical entry positions. There's been a lot of positions for instructors, and airlines have come to value instructors. They know the old adage that you don't know it until you teach it. They've learned that that holds true, so they like instructors. So get those qualifications, and then the race is on to get 1,500 hours, the minimum to be a passenger airline pilot. A freight world, you can enter at 1,200. So those are sort of basic goals. And then when you're getting toward the bigger airlines, you need 1,000 hours to be an airline captain. So 1,000 hours of airline experience. So total time, airline time. And then as a captain, my long-term goal for you would be to have a plan that gets you 2,000 hours of turbine PIC. So that's 2,000 hours as a captain in any kind of operation, but ideally airline as well. And that qualifies you for every airline. And I know that seems like a high number, and the most demanding airlines are only 1,000 turbine PIC. But what we see is that they don't get hired at the minimums. They get hired at about twice the minimums. So if an airline lists the minimum, your goal would be double that minimum. That would put you in not just qualified, but competitive. And we want you to be competitive and get the job. I will say this, that as the job market returns, it'll be a tougher market for a while, but as it gets going and the hiring picks up, I believe we'll be back in a shortage in a few years after we start hiring. It's hard to say right now, 2 or 3 years down the road. But when we get going, the person with the most qualifications and experience at that point will obviously be first in line for the jobs as they come available.
For sure. Aside from time, what other suggestions do you have for our viewers on how to really stand out as an applicant?
Well, being a professional, if you look at an airline, a picture of an airline pilot, or one in the display case, they have a display case at Delta with everybody dressed up in their uniform. You need to project that image, and it's not that hard to do. I mean, you could think military. I mean, I know we're not military pilots, but you think the Marine commercial on TV, sitting up straight, sharply dressed, tight haircut, that kind of thing. Prepare early, begin to study the industry and to study the companies that you're focusing on, get a bigger, broader background on how to approach them. Recommendations are going to be key. I mean, I say that 80% of the people hired are recommended. So you need an extensive network. The people you meet when you learn to fly, who train you, who move on to the airlines, those people you need to stay in touch with. You need to be sending the birthday cards, making the phone call every now and then, buying a beer. Whatever it takes, you got to stay in touch with these folks because you're going to need their recommendation. If 80% are recommended, 15% are qualified minorities, and 5% would be non-recommended, non-minority. So don't amaze me. Get the recommendations that you need to get this job. Attend job fairs. There's nothing like getting face-to-face. The airline recruiters hate recruiting a number. They look at a resume, they look at an application, they see numbers, this much flight time, this GPA, so on. It's okay, but they don't like it. What they want to do is put eyes on you. They want to talk to you. They want to know that you're a good person. And that resolves all that. When you walk up and hand them your resume in a job fair and you have a chance to talk, even for a few minutes, they're going to go, aha, this is our kind of person. So you need that job fair face-to-face if you can. Once you get into the environment, professionalism is the basic stuff. Show up on time, dress the part. Yeah, maybe you could be flip-flops and cut off blue jeans, but bring it up a notch. Get a collar on the shirt. Even if you're flight instructing and it's hot in the airplane, dress it up a bit. Study the company I said earlier. Prepare for each element of the interview. When you finally get an interview, They hate it when they see a good candidate that's just not prepared. Because if you think you can walk in and pass an aeronautical knowledge test or do well on some of the other evaluations they're going to give you without practice, you're probably wrong. You may think, I'm a good student, I'll do pretty good, I don't need to prepare. We find that's simply not true. And we see excellent candidates that fall by the wayside because they didn't do their homework, or they thought they were good in one area. I fly every day, I don't need to practice for the sim check. But then they get in there and they don't do well on the sim check, because if you fly the same airplane all the time, you get really good at that airplane, but the sim check's in a different airplane and you don't do so good. So you need to practice for each one. When you finally get in the interview, the biggest thing I can say, and it sounds crazy, but smile, damn it. I mean, smiling is just an incredible, and they need to like you. They need to get to know you and like you before they offer you a job. And I sort of equate it. It's like, forgive me, but it's like trying to get a date with the pretty girl on the second date, and you're talking to mom. So you really need to be tuned in to the interviewers and what they're doing. Smiling, being polite, being confident but not cocky. You got to sell yourself. In our society, it's inappropriate to talk about yourself. If your mother did it in a social environment, they'd put up with it for a little while and they'd throw her out. But in this interview, you're the only advocate. You're the only person there that can tell your story. So you're going to have to tell them about the things you did. Again, confident but not cocky. Along the way, you need to be careful to listen to the questions. A lot of gouge out there about what they're going to ask, and sometimes you pick up on the wrong key and you're answering a question that wasn't actually asked. So you need to slow down, carefully listen. And then when you do listen, they're going to ask you some questions you probably don't know the answer to. They're going to take it to a level, they're going to try to get to a point that you don't know something to see how you deal with what you don't know. So be prepared. They're going to take it to a level where you don't know. And at that point, you need to say, I don't know. We're very keen on you knowing your own limitations. You might say where you would look it up or how you would find it or how you might solve the problem. But the bottom line is you don't know. So it's okay not to know. It's actually important to be able to admit your own limits. And finally, when it's over, it's okay to ask for the job. I mean, we have this happy puppy syndrome. We have young pilots that go in for their first interview and all parts of their body are moving. The tail's going, the tongue's going, they're just so excited. And then you have a really experienced pilot come in, thousands of hours, eminently qualified, and the young guy gets the job. And we asked the recruiter, why did you do that? This guy had 6,000 hours and this guy had 2,000 hours. And you hired the less qualified pilot. And they said, the puppy was just so excited to get this job. And the older guy, and I know there are probably a few older guys watching, if you are well qualified, think you can sit on your hands, keep your mouth shut and get the job because you're qualified, you're mistaken. They're going to hire that happy puppy every time. You need to get excited about this career. I interviewed 23 times along the way. When I got done at United, I had been a DC-8 captain. I was interviewing to be a 727 flight engineer, which was not a very high position. I'd been an engineer several times before. When I got done with the interview, they actually asked me, Mr. Darby, why are you so excited about this job when you've been a DC-8 captain and we're offering you a position as a flight engineer? I said, well, let's look at United, where they base, the planes they fly, the things they do. I want to be a United pilot. And I literally psyched myself up in the hallway before I went in to put that kind of energy into my interview. And it was enough that they actually noticed and asked that, hey, at the time I was 37, which was way old at the time. And they're saying, you're wound up. Why are you wound up to be a double demotion from captain to co-pilot to flight engineer? And I got a chance to tell them. So finally, it's over. You can tell they're gathering up the papers. They're saying, it's time to leave. You can't prolong the interview. They've got 7 interviews today. They've got a certain amount of time for each one. When your time is up, you can make one closing statement, but you need to get out of the room expeditiously with a thank you. And thank you notes and emails are appropriate. And most people don't do it. But if you want to bring your name up again afterwards, remember the people that are interviewing you don't hire you. They can recommend you. And then later they meet in a week later with all the results, and people you've never met before decide whether you're going to get the job or not. So, but the people that you're talking to now must recommend you for you to get that. So follow up with them. And then if they say, you'll hear something in a week or two, and 2 weeks go by and you haven't heard, you need to follow up. You know, they've given you a guideline and you haven't heard, it's okay to call, write, visit, whatever it takes. Don't let it go by. I know guys that, you know, they called, maybe they misdialed, they thought they left a message. The guy never got it, never got the job. And he went by week after week thinking, well, they said they would call, but they didn't. Man, if they don't follow up, you follow up. It's too important. I mean, this is, we said the average major airline job for 30 years, if you get hired at 35, would be $10 million in today's dollars. Don't let that go lacking for a phone call or an email. You know, get a how goes it from them. Don't let it languish.
Perfect. Well, thank you for all of that insight. And guys, I will mention too, Kit had mentioned paperwork. Really make sure when you print out the instructions, use it like a checklist. Really ensure that everything you're submitting is exactly as requested. You might list on your resume that you're detailed oriented, but it's another thing to prove it through following through with those instructions. And so for those pilots that intend to pursue employment with the airlines, Kit, what are some types of opportunities that you would recommend to our viewers to look into to establish a career path earlier on?
Well, the airlines, like I said, sort of like the same thing you like. You know, pilots like to go higher, faster, make more noise, which is more motors. That's what they like. And for the most part, the airlines like the same thing. So you can typically pursue your dream. We do have to be careful, though. They want some pilot and command time. You're going to be a captain for them. Not all airlines require it. A few do, but all of them prefer it. So they want you to be a captain for a little while and pass that training, do a good job, be the guy in charge for a while. I might add that the fun factor goes way up when you're in charge. So be a captain, plan to get, like I said, to get to 2,000 hours turbine PIC as a captain. And I say turbine because it's not just jet. You can do this in a turboprop just like you can in a jet. It doesn't specify jet. If you had to pick one or the other, jet might be slightly better, but turboprop or jet will get it done. So you'll probably get hired sooner than this, but basically twice the published minimums. Recommendations are a must, and that takes long-term development. I have a computer program. I have a contact manager, and I've got thousands and thousands of people in it. And if I need to get my car fixed or need a recommendation for a job, they're in that database. So start building it now, because the time's going to come when your instructor is now working at the airline. You need his recommendation. It might be your student is working at the airline and you need his recommendation. So you need to keep track of them. It's important that these recommendations both work for the company that you want to work for. And the reason is they have to know what the company's like. To say you're a good corporate fit, they couldn't know if they didn't work at the company. And then the next thing is they have to be accountable. So if I say you're a good guy and you're not, they know where I live. They're going to be able to find me and say, hey, you recommended Bob. Bob was a jerk. Don't do that again. So that's why the company recommendation is most powerful. You can get recommendations anywhere, but 3 or 4 quality recommendations from the company you want to work for. And of course, you should have at least 5 to 10 companies on that list. It's a full-time job to get 3 or 4 recommendations at 5 to 10 companies. You're sending a lot of birthday cards.
Good advice. So with that, what factors would you recommend when trying to discern preferences as far as airlines?
Well, again, like in hard times, we're going to take what jobs we can find. But in the regional time builder, recommendations are important. The best for long-term goals, of course, are that quality flight time, the total time, multi-engine, turbine, captain, all that. They look at some companies, particularly look at corporate involvement, the things you would do in the community, volunteer work, leadership. If you're part of a club where you're the secretary, president, vice president, whatever, they look for additional qualities, but the foundation is going to be education. And then most of them either require or want a 4-year degree, not at the small airlines, but at the larger airlines. And then the flight time, qualifications, and experience, and then that captain experience, the 2,000 turbine PIC as a goal. Long-term, to retirement, it's always corporate fit recommendations. And then it's okay to look at pay, benefits, and retirement. I mean, again, our society, we don't talk about pay much. You and I have talked about perhaps talking more about it in one of these webinars, but these are good paying jobs. They have benefits and retirement that you can actually retire on. Where you might be based. If you're a West Coast guy and your job offers on the East Coast, commuting across the country is possible, but not recommended. So if you could get a job, I know guys that have quit Delta to go to American because they wanted to live in Houston. We'll see how that decision works out. So domestic or international flying, if you're happy flying 737s around the United States, Southwest could be an ideal choice for you. But if you want to go to Europe, Spain, South America, they don't go there, or at least they don't go there yet. So you have to sort of mix in the type of flying you want to do. And it's hard because not having ever done that, long range international flying sounds like fun. I spent my last 7 years flying long range out of Chicago. Um, I did it. I had a lot of time off. I was working 8 to 10 days a month. I made a ton of money. But the most fun I had was flying my 737 around Chicago, to garden spots like Des Moines and Grand Rapids. I mean, for a pilot, for me, takeoff and landing is the fun of it. To take off and fly 8, 10, 12 hours and land one time, I only did that 4 times a month. Half of the landings were mine. So I'm getting to land 4 times a month. When I flew my 737, I got to land 4 times a day. So, it's a whole different kind of game. It sounds exotic, but Paris on the 30th visit is just Paris, and you're trying to find Italian food. So, it's not necessarily it sounds great, but after you've done it, I like the flying part more than where you end up. And there are other people. My wife's a pilot and she loves to go. She likes those 30, 40, 50-hour layovers in faraway places. And she's the ultimate tourist, with her straw hat and her camera. She's out there seeing the world. For me, I get the flying done and get back home.
Okay. Well, that being said, prior to reaching ATP minimums, what can a pilot do to proactively prepare themselves for when they'll begin the job search and the application process? How soon do you recommend a pilot look to make that transition, looking to make a transition to a new job? Do they begin that search process?
Well, first of all, as soon as you qualify, if you meet minimums, you should apply. I've got many, many examples in those 200,000 where the guy was a co-pilot and his buddies were all saying, well, you got to make captain and you got to fly captain for a couple of years. They won't look at you. He put it in anyway. And guess what? He got hired anyway. And now they're his co-pilot because they were waiting for some magical number. If you meet minimums, you should apply. Along the way, it's important to lead a good life. I mean, things aren't going to go well if you have a lot of speeding tickets or if you get a drug or alcohol conviction. That's not going to work. So you need to live a good life. You need to stay in good physical condition. One of the requirements is that you have the licenses, ratings, experience, but you have to have that medical to go with it in order to get the benefit from this job. So it was hard enough when it was 60, but now at 65, it's difficult to maintain a medical if you're a couch potato. So you need to get a lifestyle that includes regular physical exercise, keeping yourself in shape, a good diet, maintain that. Avoid the obvious disclosure items. Nobody ever wants accidents, incidents, violations, training failures, or being fired from a job, but you control some of that. So, be cautious along the way, maintain a good record, gather the required documents. Right now, I would hate to be interviewing and trying to get my transcripts because the transcripts office probably closed right now. So if you're going to need your transcripts, your driving record, whatever, it's a good time to get those early. That's the required documents. Study the industry, know what's happening and know the companies you want to work for, what they're like. Each one has a different culture. Build and maintain a strong network. We've been talking about that. Stay in touch with folks. You don't want to just call them up when you haven't seen them in 10 years and, oh, by the way, I need a recommendation at your airline. You need to stay in touch. It's not going to go over well if they can't remember you. You need to keep up with them. Fly as much as possible. High time, it's hard to beat more flight time. And there are scoring systems. They actually produce a number from your resume or application. And that number is governed by total time, multi-time, turbine time, instructor time, whatever they're looking for. Keep your skills up. There's a lot of automation out there. As you get into bigger and better equipment, you can program that thing and it'll take you to Paris and back, no problem. But if you're smart, you're flying by hand up to 20,000, you're flying by hand back down from 10, you're doing an instrument approach, you're holding, you're doing your takeoffs and landings. If you're teaching, and I've taught thousands and thousands of hours, but every day I would take one approach and landing for myself because I had to maintain my skills too. So even though your student needs it badly, you make sure that you maintain your skills along the way because there's going to be a sim check or an airline training program that you have to be successful at.
Perfect. And speaking towards not just airlines, but all aviation career opportunities, what are some websites that you recommend for either job searches or just information on companies?
Well, the first thing I do is I've set up Google alerts for all the keywords and things that I'm looking for. And I try to cover the whole industry, so I leave it wide open. So if it's pilot hiring or retirements or benefits or pay, whatever it is, I've got keywords. So you should also have keywords for your target companies. So you should be getting alerts every day where the internet is searched automatically for you to find the references to the things that are important in your job search. After that, probably Airline Pilot Central is probably the most, it's good information. It provides, and hold on, I got to get back to my list here.
So I'm just pulling up Airline Pilot Central right now. Everyone, you're able to see Kit will search Delta for you.
Mhm.
You can view information on this site as far as their fleet, their pilots. So it's a ton of good resources.
Yeah, it's the homepage for a lot of young pilots on the way up. So typically it's a good way to do. There's also Audrey's aircraft analysis, which sounds like a business aircraft, but they do some airline work. We'll Fly for Food, pilothiring.com, pilotjobs.io, Aerocrew News, airline apps. I don't know if you wanted to look at that one. This is where you would apply to a bunch of regionals and 2 or 3 of the majors as well. Aviation Job Search, careertakeoff.com, FAPA.aero, JS Firm, Climb to 350. You probably can't look at all of these all the time, but to find ones that suit your needs, get them queued up so you can check them on a regular basis. There are some for overseas as well. So here's the airlines covered by airline apps. And it's been a growing list. I mean, it's steadily been getting more all the time.
And then this, guys, is JS Firm. So this is one that's a free resource, updated daily. You're able to see when the posting happened. So you're able to find really opportunities that are relevant and current for recent postings.
Right. And let's see, which one? Airline Pilot, pilothiring.com also has a search and notify section. And I would be on all of these, don't be too specific. I mean, ideally you'd like to have this plane and this base, but leave it open. Look at what's available around you, and don't be so restricted that you've got to only want jobs in Washington, D.C. That's not going to work. What percentage of jobs are there in Washington, D.C.? 1%. So you can't eliminate 99%. Leave it wide open. You don't have to apply. You don't have to pursue the job, but you want to be aware of the market. And I do that. Again, I'm past looking for a job, but I do this. And there's quite a bit of activity still in the corporate. The UAV drones are hot. There's a little bit of government contract. So there's still some activity out there, people posting jobs on a regular basis. I imagine the market's going to get tighter as we get toward next year. Overseas, there's Goose Recruitment or P-Prune, which are more tuned to overseas opening. Financially, if you want to know, I like Seeking Alpha. Seeking Alpha is a very expensive website, but they have little headlines and then they cut it off. But in most cases, the headlines are enough for me. But right now, during the COVID situation, they've opened up their airline analysis free to everybody. So you can go to Seeking Alpha, where you would spend thousands of dollars for their analysis to make stock investments, and get detailed information from them now without subscribing, which is thousands of dollars. I also do a lot with Aviation Week and space technology.
Thank you for sharing all of those resources with us. And so aside from job boards, from time to time, airlines and operators periodically do also host recruitment events. Can you enlighten us and discuss why or what typically happens at these events and why they really are a great opportunity?
Well, they are tremendous opportunity. My stepson is the youngest pilot hired at Southwest Airlines. And he got that opportunity by attending Women in Aviation. He's not a woman. So you don't have to be a woman. A lot of the minority job fairs are very successful in attracting the airlines. And therefore, you can go to one place and meet with 10, 15, 20 airlines of the group that you're looking for. And that's very efficient. You couldn't meet with them at all if you went to their offices. You've got to get them out of the office. And now you've got them all in one spot. So it's very efficient. The face-to-face meeting with the recruiter, like I said, they like to hire people they've met, people they've talked to. You're going to present your resume. Um, One of the questions you might have is what you could do to be more competitive, because a lot of times the minimums are not what they're hiring. They're hiring at some higher level, and that's often not published. So they can glance at that and say, well, this looks good, but if you got to 1,000 hours turbine PIC, we would be interested. They might even give you a business card at that point and say, when you get to 1,000 hours turbine PIC, give me a call. You definitely need to follow that. You want to network with other pilots and the reps that are there. I mean, we're exchanging resumes, business cards, that kind of stuff. Gather and provide contact information. We did that. Listen to your airline briefing. So a lot of these meetings have a briefing. Women in Aviation, as an example, they go each day a 1-hour briefing by a variety of airlines. And the ideal thing would be to go to that briefing and learn all about it. And it's usually a key person, chief of pilot recruiting, chief pilot, somebody who really knows what's going on. Listen to what they say before you walk up to the booth to give them the resume. That way you sort of already know, and you can narrow down to the things that you need to do, not broad-based information, which is available. A lot of pilots take these meetings, they're saying, I got past privileges, I'm working for a regional, I can fly in the morning, go see the airlines, and fly out at night, travel on a pass, no expense, one lunch, no overnight hotel, no driving. Look at all the money I'll save, Not a good idea. Our son, like I said, my son was successful there. We went early, stayed late, stayed all 3 days. I know you're spending a ton of money. I mean, we spent thousands of dollars, but we're in the bars, in the restaurants, meeting airline reps. We're going back and listening to different briefings, same briefing, but different person each day, learning different things. So really work these things. Like I said, where could you find 10, 12, 15, 30 airlines in one location? You need to really work these. So go early, stay late. When you get done with it, they're going to sort of sort the resumes. They're going to put them in the hot, the not so hot, and the no way. And they're going to go back and correlate the hot ones, the ones they like, to their online application. So you must have done that online application first. Nothing to equate it to. Even if you had recommendations, there's nothing to attach it to. It's all electronically based. So the very first step is the electronic app, and then recommendations and job fairs, the other things that come after. So your job, of course, is to be the red hot, to be qualified and personable, smile, and get in the red hot pile. And then they're going to go back and look at your electronic app, and that's when you're most likely going to get a call or an email.
Awesome. So aside from attending, and we did discuss some of the job fairs now, but another means of really securing potential opportunities with an operator that you're ultimately interested in. So which are some of the different job fairs that you recommend?
Right, we were supposed to be talking about the internal events on the last one, so I apologize. But the best would be if they have an internal event, United, Delta, American, or any other smaller company. There's nothing better if you want to work for that airline than being at their internal event. Some of them are closed. You have to be invited, which means you apply, and that process gets you an invite. Others are open and you have to join, and it usually sells out in just minutes. So you need the fastest internet connection and a really fast finger to try to get in there and get one of these internal invites to one of these internal events. On the job fair front, the commercial and minority job fairs, we already talked about Women in Aviation. There's OBAP, Organization of Black Airline Pilots. There's also a gay pilot, a Latino pilot organization, and you don't need to be in that group to attend the job fair. Commercial job fairs, we have FAPA, Aerocrew Solutions, producing commercial job fairs. The real key is if the airlines you want are there, it's a good job fair to go to. If you want Delta and Delta's not there, then that's not a good fit. If it's all regionals and you're ready for the majors, that's not a good job fair. Most of these job fairs have included all the regionals in the past. Right now, we're sort of in a wait and see mode to see what's going to happen with some of the regionals. Event job fairs, these are Experimental Aircraft Association, EAA, NBAA, National Business Aircraft Association, HAI, Helicopter Association. They have job fairs built into their annual events. So they've started doing that more recently. They've grown in participation. There's more and more airlines there. So if you're going to go off to Oshkosh, check the schedule. There's going to be a job fair day or two, and you can combine your love for experimental aircraft and job search at the same time. And then the meet and greets, which are the internal events, extremely valuable. However, some of them require an invite, which would be a good application in order to get an invite.
Sure. And for some of our viewers, since there were so many of you that showed that you were in the ab initio phases of training, a lot of these job fairs, there are also organizations that have scholarships, Women in Aviation, NGPA, OBAP, they all have scholarship opportunities as well. And it's not just for ab initio, but they also have continued, education and advancement as far as potential type ratings, things like that. So definitely, take advantage of those opportunities. And then before we even arrive at a job fair, Kit, can you talk about some ways that an applicant can really prepare themselves? What do you recommend they potentially bring with them to the event? What do they do in advance?
Okay. Well, going back to the scholarship thing, I mean, this is not small potatoes. I mean, women in aviation, they have had annually $750,000, $800,000 worth of scholarships, everything from beginning training to 777 type ratings. So this is not just a scholarship or two. This is $800,000 worth of scholarships at Women in Aviation. That's worth going for. The odds go way up when there are more scholarships and they're more valuable. So now that you're at a job fair, the first thing we said earlier, you got to update that electronic application. That's what they're going to hang, whether they like you with a resume, whether you get a recommendation, it all hangs on the electronic app. And I review electronic apps as a business. I was the first one to do it years ago. I do a few a day, pretty much up until recently. I was doing several a day. And applications are not something that we're very good at as pilots, I have to say. Some of us can't spell or punctuate, but worse yet, the questions are not clear. Sometimes they'll ask something. My favorite one is on the airline apps at Delta. They say, what is your primary language? And you say English. And then the way they ask the next question, they're actually looking for other languages, but the way they ask it, you tend to put English again. So when you print it out, it says my primary language is English and my other language is English. So again, if you're just answering the question, not printing it out and proofing it, you can really make a lot of mistakes. So I usually am able to improve them. So I encourage you to get another opinion, not your spouse or a friend, but a professional to look at your app and make sure that you're getting all the points you deserve and haven't made some of the more obvious mistakes. A lot of airlines use older retired pilots or senior pilots to review apps. I look a lot like that guy. So basically, if you're making me happy, you're probably making them happy. Attend airline briefings. Like I said, if they're meetings, go to those and learn about the airline. Develop and practice your elevator pitch, because like we did at Women in Aviation, we're sitting down to have breakfast and we're sitting across from the Southwest rep or the Delta rep, and we're talking to them. So, you need to have a little short, how you meet and exceed minimums and how you love their airline wouldn't be a bad idea either. My favorite thing is I love your airline. I did these job fairs in the past. One of our attendees at a seminar brought a picture in, and he was skydiving, going down at 135 miles an hour, and he had a sign that said, I love Southwest. He's holding a flag, and he's going down at 135 miles an hour. And that was sufficient to get an interview. I mean, that was pretty impressive, or the guy that sends his boot to them, wrapped up inside a resume saying, now that I have my foot in the door, let's talk. So you got to know that you can affect this job search. I interviewed, over 20 times, and about half the time I did something outside of the ordinary to get myself an interview. I made a call, I had a contact, I met them somewhere, whatever. You got to know you can make a difference. And the elevator pitch is sort of the way to do that. Custom resumes at the job fair. You want resumes. If you know you're going to see PSA, then you need a resume made out for PSA. But you also need some generic resumes, because you're going to have somebody you didn't know that was there, or you weren't interested in until you learn more about them, and now they need a resume, and all your resumes say PSA. So you need to have generic resumes, just career pilot employment, so you can use them if a target of opportunity pops up. Cover letters, by the way, are not used in person. If you're mailing or emailing, you need a good cover letter. But if you're handing it in at an interview or a job fair, you don't need a cover letter. Business attire. So a lot of folks have trouble with this. I mean, we're a very casual society these days, but think in uniform. And, uniforms involve a tie. Uniforms involve typically a white shirt, over the calf socks, tie with a touch of color. Just think uniform. Look at that airline's uniform and say, how can I present myself where they could visualize me in their uniform and they would like what they see? I would avoid black, however. Delta is a black, and black is sort of funeral-like. So other than black, I would mimic their uniform in cut and color. A fresh haircut. Be careful on the aftershave and cologne, that type of stuff. Minimum jewelry. For the ladies, especially minimum jewelry. This is not the time to show off your family jewels here. No perfume. Pants are okay. I mean, pilot's uniform is going to include pants, so if a woman would prefer to wear pants, that's fine. If you're doing a sim check as part of the interview, pants would be required. So, and that's a general guide to getting ready.
Perfect. And then ladies too, if you wear, if you wear makeup, normal amount, no outlandish colors on your fingernails, just to be presentable, like Kit said, be the person they want to hire.
No fake eyelashes these days. They're becoming very popular.
So we've discussed the recruitment events, we've discussed job fairs, which are really only a couple of ways in which a pilot can network. What are some of the other methods that you recommend to pilots to really help establish those industry connections?
Well, you've really got to get on social media these days. And I have trouble with some older candidates. I work with career changers and people getting out of the military. And some of these older folks just don't do social media. And a few people have tried it and don't like it and don't do it. But you can't not do social media in the job search. So even if you want to get off of it after you get the job, you're going to have to be on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, following the companies that you're interested in. Join industry organizations, like I mentioned, the National Business Aircraft. If you're trying to get a corporate job, you need to be part of the NBAA. Each industry has organizations like that. Attend industry events. I mean, there's going to be a ton of people at the National Business Aircraft Association annual meeting that are looking for corporate pilots. Subscribe to industry magazines and newsletters. Beware of unmonitored chat boards. There's invariably a handful of angry pilots out there, usually the same 10 guys are ripping up this chat board, and you would think, my God, I would never want to work there. That's a terrible place to work. Look at all the injustice that's going on at that company. It's just 10 guys that are mad out of thousands, so be careful how much time you spend on those. It's usually not the whole story or the correct story that's being put out in that environment. So social media up to a point, but beware of the blogs and the broadcast unmonitored, no accountability comments. Anybody can say anything. That's probably not a good way to get your career guidance.
Sure. And on the other side of that, beyond that, be smart when you have your own social media accounts, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. Be smart about what you post online, especially in aviation groups and forums. The rule of road that I kind of use and that I recommend to everyone: don't post anything on the internet that you wouldn't feel comfortable seeing in quotation marks with a dash and your name beside as ownership. You don't want to burn bridges. And in this industry, it's small. You don't want to limit your connections. And Kit, that being said, can you talk about how much of a factor having a contact at an airline, and I know you touched on this before, or a corporate operator can really have on helping to secure a job offer?
Okay. Well, one final, just to go along with what you said last. I mean, I can't tell you how many blurry-eyed pitcher of beer pictures there are of pilots on a layover. I mean, it's inappropriate. So after you get the job and we say count 365 days plus one, means you're off probation. So you've got a career position and you're off probation. Then you can live whatever life you want. But in the meantime, you've got to keep a clean image out there all the time. There's no exceptions. So having a contact at an airline is really valuable. And that becomes either a recommendation or someone you meet at a job fair or internal event. Anybody that's going to be your advocate. I mean, that is a tremendous benefit. 80% of people recommended, 15% minorities, 5% not recommended, and not a minority. The odds are just really low if you don't have this contact. Stay in touch with them, calls, visits, and emails. Build and maintain a network. So we got job, school, church, clubs, sports, friends, friends of friends, friends of friends' family. I mean, everything you can do to build this up. And then you have to tell them what you want. You can't expect them to say, well, there's Bob. He probably wants to be a pilot. No, they don't even know Bob is a pilot. You say, look, I'm a pilot. I'm looking for work. So one of my favorite stories is my wife is out watching our son or daughter play soccer. And they're, going back and forth, nice kick back, and who are you? Oh, that's my son. And I'm Jane, Now, what do you do? She said, oh, I'm a pilot. She happened to be furloughed at the time. I'm a furloughed pilot. And she said, oh, my husband's a pilot. Yeah, okay. And what does he do? Well, he's the chief pilot of Coca-Cola. Well, really, which division? Because there's a short range and a long range. Well, the international division. That is probably the hardest corporate job to get in America. And here she is side by side on the soccer field with the wife of the chief pilot of the international division of Coke, talking about our kids' soccer. You've got to let people know what you want. She could get an interview. She didn't want that job, by the way, because it's gone a week or two at a time, flying all over the world, and we had small kids, so it wasn't going to work. But that's the most difficult job in America, and she got it by socialization and telling someone what she was and what she needed, and it worked out. So it pays to advertise.
For sure. And for our students that are listening in, on completion of the program, you will be invited to join ATP's Alumni Association. We have over 20,000 alumni. If you're already an alumni, if you haven't yet registered, go to atpalumni.org to do so. But take advantage of that opportunity to receive mentorship early on. I mean, we have phenomenal graduates, and so many of them are already well established in their career, Kit's stepson being one of them. We encourage you to utilize that resource to make industry connections and gain that knowledge really early on, because it's really it's a valuable experience. And that being said, Kit, what advice do you have to pilots that are looking for a job in the current market right now? Do you have any recommendations when beginning a search under the present conditions to help locate opportunities?
Well, the biggest thing would be to start early. Like I said, it's going to get worse before it gets better. So if you know you need a job or need one soon, you need to be on it, because it's going to get more difficult as we move in toward next year. Be patient and persistent on a steady pressure. We talked last time, a lot of pilots are rejected or aren't successful right away. They sort of get mad as hell, not going to take it anymore, withdraw, don't do anything for 6 months or a year. That's a really bad choice. What you need to do is be emboldened. Don't take no for an answer. Patience and persistence. Keep flying any way possible. I mean, you've done the flight instructor thing. You're planning to move to the regional. That doesn't happen right away. Keep doing what you're doing. Get the best flying job you can. Get as much flight time as possible while you wait for the next level. Don't say, well, I'm done. Don't want to do this anymore. I want to do something else. And maybe that something else isn't available right now. Play the odds. I mean, we know that there's going to be some opportunities better than others. The big airlines are going to be cut back. Some regionals might be hiring, others might not. Corporate, cargo, fractional, government contract, flight instruction. There's going to be opportunities in these areas. Take the jobs where you find them. Get the best job you can, but don't not have a job because it's not the one you wanted.
Perfect. Well, that's sound advice. And I know that we had already covered previously what to do if you haven't heard back. So with that being said, we'll move on to our viewer Q&A. What are some books that you would recommend reading that are aviation related?
Well, the books that we know that are most used in the interview, the aeronautical knowledge test typically comes from things like the Aerodynamics for Naval Aviators. These are not light reading. However, they are the foundation of aerodynamic instruction and knowledge worldwide. So Aerodynamics for Naval Aviators, a book on weather, a book on instrument flying. There's a great book out there. I don't have the name exactly right, but it's Everything About Everything. So it's basically an expanded version of the Aeronautical Information Manual. So the AIM or Everything About Everything is sort of if you had to buy one book, that would be the book to buy. There's a couple of interview books out there, Checklist for Success, some of those. So those are all good reading. And you need to be ready for each section of it and keep your skills up.
And Paul would like to, Paul's one of our instructors. He'd like to know what are if you had to attend one job fair, which one would you recommend for the most networking potential?
I recommend Women in Aviation. Again, that's where my son was successful. It's the biggest one. It has the most airlines at it. And it's in various major cities around the country, different one each year. It comes up in March. By the way, you need to sign up early for these things. They typically have some portions of it that are limited in participation. They sell out. So if you're going to go, you might as well sign up early and be in a position to go to that career event. You may go to the meeting and find the career event sold out.
And from your experience at United, what really set them apart and that made you go there that in terms of culture?
Okay, well, I was working at Braniff and got furloughed. I was working at Republic, and they were uh, managed by a, a manager that was known for merging. So I figured they were going to merge, and you didn't know with who, so it could be good, it could be bad. And then I got hired by Piedmont, and Piedmont was my hometown airline. I was born in Raleigh, grew up in Fayetteville. They served the Carolinas. Uh, Seemed like a dream made in heaven. They had 2,300 pilots, and all but about 500 of them were younger than I was, so I could never move up past them. When I got hired by United, I made the same analysis. They had 5,000 pilots, and only 500 of them were younger than I was. I retired number 500 at United, captain on a big airplane. I might have never made captain at Piedmont based on the demographics of that group. So I was also, I mean, these are things that shouldn't matter, but Piedmont was a button down collar, penny loafer. You know, they just had a certain collegiate look to them, I guess. And that wasn't me. I mean, I was a straight collar Wall Street kind of guy. And that was United's look. You know, they were should have nothing to do with it. But I saw myself, the corporate fit at United for me was better than Piedmont, even though they served my home area. I didn't fit in very good at home anyway. So
And Patrick, this is a really good question, Patrick. When it comes to reaching out to a friend at an airline that you wish to work for, is there any recommendations you have, in regards to asking that favor in the industry, and what is expected at the friend, at the company as far as when they send your name as a recommendation?
well, there's several ways the recommendation can go in. It can be a separate letter, or it could be a form online, you know, where you fill out certain parts. The best thing you can do is give them a resume, because you know all about your background and they know parts of it, but they've missed big parts of it. So in order for them to brag about your qualifications and experience, you need to give them a resume. The biggest thing they can do is tell them that they've flown, if you've flown with them, that you're a good pilot, good instructor, whatever, uh, and that you have high moral, professional credentials. You know, not just qualified, but you're a good person. And what I like to see is if they really believe that, and I'm sure they will, then you need to have them put on their recommendation their personal phone number and email. Because what's going to happen in the interview, if there's a question and something doesn't line up, then the airlines don't know the truth, but they know inconsistency. So they look at what you say in the interview, what you write on the application, and what they find in the background check. And if that doesn't line up, then a little flag goes up and goes, wait a minute, there's, something doesn't smell right here. So that's when we want them to have the means to call your friend and say, hey, what's the deal with Bob? This doesn't line up with that. And he's going to say, oh, this or that, and it's going to be okay. So the ability to directly contact personally your recommendation, that's the guy putting himself on the line for you. So resume, I hate to go so far as to say this, but in many cases, you're going to write the recommendation. Okay, so put it in Word, make it editable, put down the basics, send it to them, and they're going to modify it, make their little changes, and send it in. So it's not unusual to get it started as a draft and send it to your friend to get them off of ground zero, because some guys can't write or some guys can't get started, and this is your career and it's too important for it not to get done.
Right. Kenneth, he has a question. So he said he doesn't have a four-year degree, but he's owned several successful companies. What are your recommendations? Kenneth, that wouldn't qualify as, versus a degree, but I'm sure that Kit can talk about the way that you can earn that while you're still making career progression.
Well, the people that we see that are hired without a degree have what we call significant life experience. And that means a whole bunch of zeros behind their flight time. So if you're a 10,000 hour guy, you might, and there are companies that require it, about half of them require, so there's nothing you can do there. If you're required, you might sneak in through a flow agreement. Some people have been hired at airlines that require 4-year degrees in the flow, but they didn't have one. Having a 2-year degree greatly increases the odds. Having no degree and not working on it absolutely sends the wrong message. We know they think it's important. If it's important to you, you'd be working on it. So not having one's one thing, but not working on it, that's another. So if you don't have it and you're not working on it, the odds are dismal. I mean, we're down in below 1% here. Not having it and working on it, that's acceptable. 2-year degree is better than nothing. 4-year degree is best, does not have to be in a technical area or aviation, just anything. Make good grades, complete on time. It will not, work experience outside of flying will not make up for the degree. And at half of the airlines, it's a requirement, so they really can't waive it.
And what specific community involvement opportunities would you recommend as far as staying involved and helping yourself stand out on a resume?
Okay, well, what I suggest is that most of these airlines, and the big ones especially, have a big community outreach going on already. So if Delta is the one I know best, I live here in Atlanta, they're involved with Habitat for Humanity, Breast Cancer Society. It's all over their website. So if you go and look at what they're supporting, that would be a good one for you to support if you want to work at that airline, although it's not critical. I mean, it could be taking care of raptors or whatever. I mean, I've seen one recently. I had a resume where the guy was rehabilitating, birds of prey. I mean, whatever. My son got involved in the commemorative Air Force, where I have a big chapter here in Atlanta, in Peachtree City. They've got all kinds of old warplanes, and he was volunteering and working there. Everybody was 75 years old, and he was 25 years old. But get involved in something that matters to you. Put enough time in. They're going to ask you about it. You can't say, well, yeah, I joined that 5 years ago, and what have you done? Well, nothing. Or my company did it, and I did one build with Habitat for Humanity 10 years ago. You're going to give it a little bit of regular time. Doesn't have to be a huge amount, but give it some regular attention so you can look them in the eye and say, I'm involved in this. And if you want to pick one that aligns with the airlines you want, then simply check their website.
Perfect. And guys, we are approaching our hour, so I'll give one last question. Kit, as far as if someone doesn't have their CFIs, what are some other, what types of jobs would you recommend?
Well, the CFI is very flexible, and we certainly recommend it. But without it, there's all types of other things you can do. You can fly corporate without a lot of flight time if you know somebody, if they're willing to give you a chance, if you're willing to buy some additional training, if right place, right time. So it doesn't hurt to ask. There's things like pipeline patrol, ferrying aircraft, photography, fish spotting, fire spotting, crop dusting. There's a million things you can do. But most people are flight instructors, and I highly recommend that you reconsider that, because that's how most people do it.
For sure. I mean, I know I used to fly skydivers, and you learn a lot of stick and rudder skill there, but you're not getting the IFR experience that if you're wanting to head to an airline is ultimately something that you would like to see, or a lot of these even cargo companies. But with that said, everyone, again, Kit, thank you so much for sharing all of your knowledge and your wisdom with us today. I'm going to show everyone if they have any questions for you after this, where they'll be able to reach out to you. So you can go to kitdarby.com, and from there, you're able to learn a little bit more about them, reach out and contact. And if you, Kit, if I go to your About Us, you're able to see a phone number, a little bit more of a bio. You scroll down, there's contact information for you right there. But we really appreciate you taking the time to join us today and share all of your knowledge and your industry expertise. And thank you so much.
Thanks, Ashley. We'll see you again soon, I hope.
Perfect. Well, everyone have a great weekend. Fly safe. For upcoming webinars, you can go to atpflightschool.com/webinar to view more information, and have a great weekend.